This episode of the podcast is brought to you by That Sober Guy Meetings. Go to thatsoberguy.com, click on the live meetings tab, and register for the next Sunday morning live online support group recovery meeting. Today's guest is Jason Smith, author of The Bitter Taste of Dying. I got 3 words for you. Get this book.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
This is Shane Rayburn, and you're listening to That Sober Guy podcast on Recovery Radio. Living one day at a time for a sober, healthy, happy life. For more information, visit www.thatsoberguy.com. And now, let's start the show. All right, today's guest is Jason Smith, author of The Bitter Taste of Dying. Jason's a graduate of the University of California, Davis. His work's been published extensively in both online and print media. Jason is also creative director of therealedition.com, an online community that allows addicts and their loved ones to publish their stories of addiction and recovery. Jason's heavily involved in the recovery community, where he frequently shares his experience, strength, and hope in getting out of the hell that is addiction. Currently lives in Northern California with his wife, Megan, and 2 children, Jaden and Isabella. Jason, what's up, man? Thanks for joining the show today.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So we're definitely going to get into your book, The Bitter Taste of Dying. What is life like today, being clean and sober for you?
Man, my life, that's one thing about writing a memoir, is it's a great reminder of how bad it was. So much of that book is almost like a 4th and 5th step where, I sort of, to tell the stories, and to go back into the mindset that I was in, makes me really appreciate, like, waking up this morning and not being dope sick, or waking up this morning and there was money in my bank account.
Yeah.
I'm not putting my drug dealer's kids through college no more. Like, it's just nice, man. It made me really appreciate just waking up and having a normal life. Like, I can remember being strung out and thinking, I never want one of those normal lives. Look at those people. And now, man, it's a beautiful thing. Like, I'm walking my daughter to the bus stop every morning and things like that. Like, I really cherish and I appreciate those moments now. But to get to that point, I had to sort of go through all the shit that I went through, to make it here.
Yeah. And you said a good thing, like you actually get to recognize the fact and enjoy the things that you do. What are some of the things that you do to help keep you on that straight path, on that clean and sober lifestyle? Like, what's like a daily routine for you?
I gotta structure my life, and sometimes as a writer that can be hard because, I don't have a boss. And so it requires a lot of self-motivation and self-discipline. But at the same time, writing is one of those things, at least for me, that I can't force. And so if I'm not feeling it that day, like, I can't do it. And, I have to stay pretty disciplined in terms of my regimen. And I wake up at the same time every day. I've got a schedule that I keep to. As far as my recovery goes, my own personal story involves a 12-step program. And that's just my story. It's not, I'm not one of those guys that say it has to be 12-step or nothing. But for me, that's what works. And so, going to meetings to staying plugged in with a support group and people who understand and things like that, that's something I always do. And to be honest, it's something I really enjoy. I enjoy getting out to meetings and seeing people and seeing how they're doing. And then there's the flip side of it. You go out there and you see people doing the same things, in and out, that just can't get it. And, or they're choosing not to get it. And, I see them and my heart breaks. And at the same time, it makes me really grateful that I'm not there.
Yeah. I think, one of the articles that you had written, I think it's on your blog, what happens in rehab might not stay in rehab.
Right.
And it was a really good article. My wife read it last night too, and there was a line in there that I was reading across that really hit me, and it said, "That's the thing about drug addiction. You hear a lot of shit, but you never really dig too far to confirm it, because whatever you find out is going to be covered with layers of bullshit, manipulation, and half truths. And, you know, we've gone through that, and I'm sure all of us in the recovery community, either with ourselves or with some of the friends and family members that we know, or people we've met maybe in recovery. And you never really know what is true and what is not true. And so it's really hard to kind of get into that person's space, I guess, and offer them help. And that's why I always say to myself, like, I'm the only one that can help myself. You know, you're the only one that can help yourself. We're never going to be able to do it for somebody else, our kids, our family, unfortunately. What would you say to that? And, you know, what was going through your thoughts as you kind of wrote this article, what happens in rehab might not stay in rehab?
Well, on that story there, that, you know, it's in two halves. You know, the first half of it is, it sort of endears you to the people in the rehab, and everyone's got a story and everyone's got a history, and you know, you start to see a little bit beneath the surface. And then the other side of it is sort of like a where are they now? And on that where are they now, you know, it's sad. You know, the guy in the story, Carlos, you know, I still stay in touch with him. One of them's dead. The other one, last I heard, was, you know, just off and doing her thing. And so it's like, I can't let, you know, you really have to walk that line between letting them, being there for them without letting them affect your recovery in a negative way. And, for me, you know, I just got a call today from a lady who got my number from a mutual friend, and whose son is really going through it right now with heroin addiction. And he made a comment to her about, you know, if you don't do this and this, I'm going to die. You know, doing that sort of drug addict manipulation thing. Mm-hmm. And she asked me, like, should I take this serious? And I said, I don't know. Like, I don't want to be the one to give you that answer, because if I say no and then he turns around and dies, you know, I don't want to live with that guilt. And so I really try not to get involved in those kinds of decisions or those kinds of situations. But, you know, when you go to meetings or you go to counseling, group counseling, or anything that involves other addicts, you know, they're going to affect you. It's always up to, you know, I believe it's always up to me how much I let them affect me and in what ways I let them affect me. So if somebody that I care about goes out and they relapse and they're living in the, you know, on the streets or whatever, like, I can either let that drag me down, or I can use that as motivation, like to keep doing this thing and to keep plugging away at this recovery thing, because I don't want that to happen to me. And so I think it really is at some point a matter of perception and perspective in terms of how you let those things affect you.
You see those other things, those other people and what they're going through, and we want to offer them, you know, help, but at the same time, I think by helping ourselves and that saying of attraction rather than promotion, and we just hope that we do the best that we can, and hopefully by spreading, you know, our, you know, the things that we've been through, and some of the things that we've learned, maybe that we're able to get that message out there, and people can see the way that we're living our lives in the now, versus, you know, that lifestyle that we used to live.
Yeah, and I mean, when I look at like my early recovery, the people that inspired me the most weren't people that gave me things. They weren't people that were giving me you know, that were enabling me, or they weren't people that when I hit them up for money, they gave it to me. Those aren't the people who inspired me or who motivated me. People that motivated me were the people who seemed to be having a good life after having been where I was. And so to know that that guy in that meeting used to be a hardcore addict, and now he's got a wife and kids and a job, and he's a productive member of society, like, he doesn't have to give me anything. He doesn't have to, you know, just seeing him gives me hope that maybe I could do that too.
Yeah, that's so true. And, you know, we really learned from each other, and I can't remember which article it was. There's a couple of them that I had read. You had mentioned something about just being in a treatment setting, and it's just almost the madness and the unbelievableness that you could put, you know, a few strangers who have this one thing in common, addiction or alcoholism, and they can really sit in there and help each other, you know, and that's always been one of those strange things that I don't really know that I understand myself, but I know that it works because I've experienced it myself. Anyways, let's get into the book, man. So when did the bitter taste of dying? Where did that kind of start?
So I mean, it started as just sort of a. It's a weird thing how it all came about. Like I wrote a story in a local newspaper called Heroin in the Foothills. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any writing background or writing experience, and I sort of just at about a year clean walked into this newspaper and pitched them this idea, and they let me run with it, and it ended up doing really well here locally. And so I had a cousin of mine who said, "Hey man, you should check out this website, medium.com. You can post stuff, people can read it." So I started writing. I started writing like first person narrative, and the first story I wrote was the first chapter in the book, which is a story about when I found my uncle dying of a heroin overdose when I was 14. And so I had never told my family what happened that day, really. I mean, they knew my uncle died because it was just him and me at the house, and my parents were out of town, and so nobody really knew all the sort of intricacies of that day. And I started writing about it, and the more I started writing about it, the less it started to hurt. And I didn't realize how much I was holding on, of this story until I wrote it and let it out, and felt that sense of relief. And I was able to share it with my family, and they were able to sort of see what went on that day and things like that. But it inspired me to keep going. So I think the second story I wrote was the story about when I went to jail in Mexico. And those two stories got me a deal with Thought Catalog Books. And they approached me, and the editor over there, Mink, she said, would you be interested in putting this into a memoir? And so I did. And it all happened really fast from the time I started writing to the time I got the book published. But every chapter of that book is sort of a story that I needed to get out for whatever reason, and that's sort of I discovered by accident, and how valuable writing can be in that sense, of just sort of providing relief.
Yeah, that it really is that therapy. It's very therapeutic to write. And you're fucking good at it, man. I just want to let you know. I'm sure you get that a lot, but I mean, they're really that first chapter you were talking about. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. I went back to my wife. I said, you're not going to believe this. I mean, look, listen to that. I kind of told her, about it. And, I don't know if you're comfortable with talking about that first chapter about Uncle Mark, the master carpenter, ping pong champion, friend, and heroin addict. Is that something that we could touch on?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wrote about it, so I'm definitely comfortable talking about it.
Sure.
Yeah, that day was crazy. It was a Saturday morning, and my uncle, he was an amazing carpenter, an amazing human being who just happened to be, severely addicted to heroin. And he had come up to stay with us to get clean, and he was able to stay clean for a few months. And my parents went out of town, and the night before, the night before it all went down, we stayed up, him, me, and I think I just changed the name of the book, but Mikey, we were playing ping pong and listening to Hendrix records and just really had a nice night. And the next morning I woke up, and when I walked into the living room there, I saw him sort of slumped back against the recliner with the needle in his arm, and he was out. And, I was 14, so I didn't really know how to handle it. I didn't know, I was afraid of calling 911 because I didn't want him to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I was afraid, I called 911 and the cops show up and he wakes up and then now he's going to jail. And so I just kind of pulled up a chair and watched. And so it was really this surreal day because for a good hour there, I just kind of pulled up the chair and watched him die. I didn't know it at the time that that's what I was watching, but I was watching a man die. I was watching I was seeing this is what happens during an opiate overdose. And I watched his breathing change. Later on, it's actually interesting. I was showing the story to a woman who's a friend of mine, and she's a nurse, and she was explaining to me that, you know, the breathing, because in the book I explained how his breathing style and how he was breathing at the time and how it changed, and she was telling me, like, she was sort of explaining to me why his breathing changed, and that, you know, that's what happens. Like, that's all overdoses, that's what happens. And or opiate overdoses anyway. And so he starts dying, and eventually he starts foaming out of the mouth, and at that point is when I called 911. And, we tried giving him CPR. Mikey woke up, and we both tried giving him CPR. And, the paramedics said he died between the house and the hospital, but, I watched him. I felt him die. And so that's where the title of the book actually comes from. That is when I was giving him mouth to mouth, that taste, when he was foaming out of the mouth, it got into my mouth, and it was not a nice scene. And that taste, I'll never forget that taste. And that's where the title of the book comes from. But that was my first introduction to drug addiction. But it's strange, because when I started my own addiction, I saw it so much differently, because mine was pharmaceuticals, and I never made that connection. Of what he went through and what I was doing. I was always able to sort of rationalize what I was doing because it was different. But despite all that, that was my first real introduction into the drug game.
And that's something that I had actually noted down here was you had said that the pharmaceuticals, and I think a lot of people don't put that recognition on the pill, and because, and I put this in quotes, they're legal drugs, doctors prescribing them. Here you go, they must be okay. To my knowledge, prescription medication is one of the biggest abused drugs, I think, in the nation. So what's your take on big pharma, the war on drugs, legal drugs? I really think that I know there's a lot of people out there that are bringing awareness to this cause, but I think it's still so not talked about, especially in the mainstream media, because it's such a big business. Have you written anything about that, or kind of what's your take on that?
Actually, it's funny that you asked that. I'm actually right in the middle of a piece right now that
really
I think is going to be pretty hard hitting.
That's awesome, dude. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, and it sort of details the rise of the prescription drug epidemic and how it happened. And I think it'll be a powerful story once it's all done. But as far as like my thoughts on it, it's it's what happens to your body if you put heroin in your veins and you metabolize it into morphine, and then you take codeine and it metabolizes, some oxycodone or something, and it metabolizes it into morphine. What's the difference? I mean, basically you're putting they're the same thing. They're going to invoke the same reaction from you. I really think when it comes to the prescription drug problem, we haven't even reached like the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to see. And these drugs have been overprescribed by doctors who, in a lot of ways, and this is one thing I've learned writing the story I'm writing, where I came into it with a different attitude toward doctors. The more I read about what went on, I actually feel a little bit of sympathy for the doctors, because the doctors were getting squeezed by legislators to start, treat pain, and they were being rated. They made pain a fifth vital sign, meaning, that's a little smiley face when you go in the hospital. Which one of these are you? What's your pain 1 to 10? And if you, didn't treat it right, then you were given a bad rating. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And at some point, I think we're going to have to ask the bigger picture of, at what point did Americans as a society come to the decision that we no longer wanted to feel any pain?
Wow.
Because that's really what we're talking about here. I think the pills are feeding that, but I think it's feeding something. And the underlying question we're going to have to ask is, Like, are we really a society that refuses to feel anything uncomfortable anymore? Because, I mean, there's pills, and it's not just for physical pain. I'm talking emotional pain.
Yeah.
You know, I had a friend who broke up with his actually his fiance. And he came, you know, like probably 2 weeks later, and his doctor had put him on an antidepressant because he was, like, feeling so down.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember telling him, I was like, dude, what? You're supposed to feel down. Like, it's okay to feel down. That's like a human emotion.
Yeah.
But we don't want to feel that. Like, the doctors are there to treat it, and the pharmaceuticals industry is there to sell it like an antidote to anything that's unpleasant now. And I think you know, it's going to be debilitating in the society because so much of what we learn as we grow up comes as a result of hurt. You know, that first I couldn't love my wife the way I love her if I hadn't gone through heartbreak before. You know, I couldn't appreciate the life that I have now if I didn't have the pain that I felt before. I think there's a certain strength that comes from going through adversity. And I think there's now, I just think it's a tendency for so many people when they get put in that position, they just go get a pill to numb it out. You know, they're feeling anxious, instead of investigating, well, why do you feel anxious or what do you feel anxiety about, and really processing it and dealing with the issue, we just take a Xanax. You know, if my shoulder's hurting and I go to the doctor, he doesn't really look to see what is causing the shoulder pain. He just gives me a pill to mask the pain. And so we never really get to the real issues. And I think that's the big, you know, that's the big victim here. That's I think as a society we're going to have to decide whether or not that's how we want to go about it.
Yeah, and so true. The fact that we must go through adversity, we must fail at things, we must make mistakes at things in order to learn, to help shape the men, the women that we become as we grow older. So, you know, this is kind of funny, I think, but you know, I don't believe in the everybody gets a fucking trophy type of thing. You know what I mean? Because it's very similar to that. We need, you know, as kids, we need to experience losing. We need to understand that we're not always going to win. We're not always going to get the things that we desire in our lives. We're not always going to get the jobs that we want, you know, and when we can really take those and learn from them and then move on to the next experience and apply that instead of just, here's a pill, numb it out and go about your business, pay your taxes, and be a good slave. Really, I mean, that's kind of the way I almost see that. Yeah,
I mean, and it's funny you bring this up. I was playing Uno. My wife was sitting on the couch. I was playing Uno with our daughter, and she's 5. She just started kindergarten, and we're playing Uno, and I beat her. And she's so used to her grandma letting her win, like she didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, when do I get to win? I said, when you're good enough. Like, keep practicing. This is how you get better. Like, we're going to keep playing, and you'll get better, and then eventually you're going to win. But Grandma lets me win. I said, well, you ain't at Grandma's. And you know, and you know, you do it in a loving way, but I agree, you know, I think it's important that, you know, children at that age learn that, like, that it's not always going to be a success, and that's okay. Like, losing is okay if you take it as an opportunity to get better and to learn what you did wrong last time.
Yeah.
And what did you do wrong? What can you improve on? And what can you practice? And you know, but when it comes to, like, medication and things like that, yeah, I mean, I just interviewed Johan Hari, who wrote a book called Chasing the Scream, and he just did a TED Talk that got a lot of exposure that deals with addiction. And, you know, he's of the belief, and a lot of what he says I agree with. Some stuff I don't, but most of what he was saying I agree with, in the sense of, you know, addiction is caused by really a severe disconnect with the rest of society. Like, you're not bonding with anybody else; you're bonding with your substance. And yeah, you know, when it comes to drug addiction today, yeah, I mean, look at the amount of debt being carried by people in the middle class right now, and the amount of homes that have been foreclosed upon.
I just say, look at the middle class. It barely exists anymore at that,
Right.
I mean,
and so everybody's struggling. I mean, everybody's struggling right now. And, it's not even a Republican Democrat thing, in my opinion. It's well, I don't want to get too political, but,
no,
we're kind of, like you said, we are slaves to a lot of these corporations and these banks and these financial institutions. And so if I'm working 12-hour days digging ditches and I hate my job and I don't get paid enough, but I got to keep it because I got to pay rent, and that's the only thing I can really afford to pay. So I go and I do a job that I don't want, and that I wish there was an opportunity to advance or to move up, but there isn't. But I keep that job, and I come home to a wife or to a family that I'm not happy with, or that just the stress is becoming too much. Like, it makes sense why people want to just sort of numb that out or medicate it.
Yeah.
And I think quality of life and addiction are really tied together. And I think it's one of those things where if I go down to the gas station at 4:00, it's a line out the door for liquor sales, and it's just people getting off of work and they just want to go home and turn off for a few hours. And I can't really say I blame them. Can't really say I blame them because I've been there. And some of them, I don't know people, they've got problems or not, but, with alcohol or with drugs or whatever, but like, I get that desire to want to just kind of tune everything out and turn it off for a little while.
And not feel, which is kind of what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. And back to your point real quick, I have to touch on it. I'm trying hard not to, but I have to. The two-party system is a show. The whole damn system is out of order. Okay. So I bring that up because it is kind of relevant to what we're talking about here. And I highlighted this line in here because I was fucking cracking up when I read it. It says, in the legal world, the girl who just got drunk fucked by a stranger 8 hours prior had the moral high ground. And the basis of what, where that line fits in, I was hoping maybe you could explain in a minute or two kind of what this article is about and what you saw going into the court systems, because I've seen the same thing. And many of us who are kind of up to date on this type of thing, it's very common, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's a story about being caught in the system, and it's in a system that's designed to keep you in it. And so I'm watching, basically, I had some legal shit that I had to deal with, and don't get me wrong, it was my legal stuff. I did it, so I needed to handle it. Mm-hmm. But I'm watching this sort of plea deal after plea deal after plea deal, and just kind of watching the lawyers, the public defenders, pass them off to the district attorneys, and then just kind of runs them through. And they're putting these, the judge tells them, okay, we're suspending your driver's license, but you need to take these parenting classes, and you need to take this DUI class, and you're to maintain employment. And that's like the restriction, that's what they tell this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, there's no way this guy, how's he going to get to work? Yeah. How's he going to get to his DUI classes? How's he going to get to his parenting classes? And so what's going to happen is he's going to fail, which is going to bring him back into the system, or back in front of a judge to explain why he failed. And then as a consequence of that failure, he's going to have even more restrictions put on him, to the point where, like, at some point, the guy's just going to say, fuck it, and stop coming.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what our legal system is right now. Is we put these demands on people, and then we strip away any resources they're going to need to meet those demands. And I think if you look at it from a big picture, it's like that makes sense. It makes sense why they do that. That's look at all those judges and all those clerks and all those lawyers and all those bailiffs, like everybody who's employed by this criminal system, by the justice system. Everybody who has jobs as a result, it's in their best interest to keep people coming back. It's not in their best interest to rehabilitate anyone.
Yeah. And, you know, and I always want to say, because I have friends who, and I'm sure you do as well, who are involved in that line of work. And so I think that, I think there's a thin line in between that. Definitely. That's, you know, I don't want to get into the whole good cop, bad cop type of thing right now. But the system is designed as a business. And I think that's what, when you really look at it for what it is a business. And, you know, we won't get too into you get into the whole private prison system. I mean, we have private prisons in this fucking country. Like what, like who, that's unbelievable to me. So how do we profit on that? Well, we keep felons coming in, and we keep them coming in, and we keep convicting people. So it really is, like you said, an endless cycle. And I can't remember exact statistics, but I know so many of them are drug related charges where people are addicted to drugs, you know, and that's
half,
really a sad
a little
thing.
bit over half, a little bit half of federal prisons, or in fact, I think federal prisons closer to 70%, and state prisons are closer to 50%, were drug related, and which makes you think. So let's take the 50% number. So that's half. Okay. Let's say half the federal inmates are there for drug related charges. So hypothetically, if right now in the White House there was a button that could be pushed, and that button would eradicate drug addiction forever. Like there would be no more drug addiction in this country. People would be cured. It just wouldn't exist. They couldn't push it. Because if they pushed it, then that means 50% of the lawyers, 50% of the judges, 50% of the police officers, 50% of the correctional officers are going to be unemployed overnight. Mm-hmm. And that would cause a panic. So, you know, that's the bad news is we can't look, I don't believe we can look to the government to fix this problem for us, because it's not in their best interest to fix it. In fact, it's in their best interest to keep us going through the system. Yeah. And I don't mean the individuals working it. I'm talking about the system. The system itself, but they have no control over.
These are the people at the top. These are the people at the top that you're referring to.
Right, and so it's not in the government's interest to combat, to really try to do something about drug addiction, because the government employs so many people because of it. That's the bad news. The good news is, I think we don't need them. Mm-hmm. I don't think we need the government to do this for us. So that's like when it comes to pharmaceuticals and things like that. I think it's up to us to stop demanding them. It's up to us to stop. You know, it's supply and demand type of thing. And in the same way that if we stopped demanding the drugs in America, Mexico would stop supplying them. They're not gonna go through all that effort to bring drugs to a country that's not going to buy them. In that same fashion, we as a collective body, and that's I think where the difficulty comes in, because we are so not collected in recovery. We have a lot of little advocacy groups and things like that, but there's no real central voice where we can make demands and say, hey, we want this changed. Hey, we want this policy. Hey, we want, we don't have that voice. We don't have that power, like a lobbyist. We don't have a lobbyist group in Washington, working for us. And so I think that's where we have to come together. And once we come together, then we can start making these demands, and we can start making our voice heard. Because the government's not going to do it for us.
It's such a good point, man. It's so valid, and it's so true. And you know what? Just the thought popped into my head. That's exactly what we're doing right now. That's exactly what you're doing by writing. Writing books, writing articles about this kind of shit. That's the same reason I talk to different people and share my knowledge and my opinions and my experiences too. And so I think at least at the minimum, we're doing the right thing that we can do right now. And I think the more people do that, and it really does seem to me, I don't know about to you, but just in the last couple of years, it really does seem like so many more people are waking up to this and realizing, how the central banks control everything, and how the prison system and the court systems is a business, and people are starting to understand that. So you can kind of see that more people are speaking out about it. And I think people that got
loved ones, or like when it comes to addiction, for example, I think there's a generational shift that's occurring where people today are much more likely and much more willing to put themselves out there, to put their face out there and say, yeah, I'm an addict and here's my story, than say a generation ago. And I think, that's the thought behind the website that I'm I've co-founded, therealedition.com, where it's basically a spot for people to tell their story. And here's, and to humanize these stories of addiction, and to make them real, because that, when you think drug addict, if you're still thinking a drug addict, what a drug addict looks like is that guy in the gutter with a needle in his arm in a back alley somewhere, you are, very mistaken. A drug addict today takes all shapes and sizes and all forms. And I think the more those people tell their story, the more we can humanize, this affliction.
So I'm just looking at the clock here, and I want to respect your time. If there's someone out there listening right now who's struggling, man, who's just at that point, that breaking point, like they want help, but they don't know what to do to get it, what can you tell them, Jason?
All I can say is that I've been there. I've been as low as a human being can feel, and done things, and been experienced things for which I felt tremendous amounts of guilt and shame. And I've been there wondering if it could get better. And I've been there wanting to die. And my life today is a beautiful life. So something happened between then and now. And so all I'll say to somebody who's struggling, is that it gets better. It will get better if you let it get better, but it's going to take some work.
If just one person out there here's one thing that sticks and it helps them today or tomorrow, I mean, that's really what this whole thing is about. So your website, authorjasonsmith.com, Jason, and also check out therealedition.com as well. Where else could people contact you or find any more info out about you?
They can go, if they just search jasonsmithmedium.com, that's medium like the size, then they can pull up some of my writing. All my writing's on my website, like you said, authorjasonsmith.com, Amazon, The Bitter Taste of Dying. It's available in print and in ebook. The website's probably the easiest way because you can actually contact me directly by email there too if you have any questions about anything.
Yeah, everyone listening out there, I highly recommend getting The Bitter Taste of Dying. It's an amazing story. It's a great book. Jason, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to come on today and share some of your thoughts, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun.
It was, man. I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, for sure.
This has been another episode of That Sober Guy Podcast on Recovery Radio with Shane Ramer. For more information, visit www.thatsoberguy.com or you can email Shane at sobriety@thatsoberguy.com. Thanks again for listening and enjoy a sober, healthy, happy life.